Good morning. I just want to recap the activities that you've done so far in the module, Plastics in the Ocean, and get you started on your next activity called Feeding on Single-Use Plastic. So the very first activity in the module is called Plastic Pollution, and in this activity you viewed a slideshow and a short video, and then you and your classmates conducted a virtual discussion about your personal experiences and your opinions of single-use plastic items. And then in the second activity, using the Seas of Plastic Interactive, you explored how plastic pollution is distributed around the world in the world's oceans using the Seas of Plastic Interactive. And you took a closer look at these particular locations around the world: China, North America, Indonesia, India, and Japan. And in the third activity, you explored some of the key vocabulary that are used when discussing this particular type of marine pollution. So now we're ready to take a closer look at how feeding on single-use plastic affects organisms feeding in different parts of the ocean. So our overarching question is, how do different forms of plastic litter affect animals feeding in different parts of the ocean? So here's our background. So different forms of marine life gather their food in different ocean zones. For example, some birds are surface feeders. They skim along just above the ocean surface and scoop up small bits of floating fish. Many fish are pelagic feeders. Remember, pelagic refers to the open ocean away from the shore. So these are away from the shore feeders. They swim about eating smaller animals, plankton, which move along with the currents, and other food that share the water with them. Many whales, turtles, seals, and diving birds are pelagic feeders. Other kinds of fish, turtles, whales, and sea otters swim along the bottom to scoop up food from the ocean floor. So the ocean floor are benthic feeders. Animals that feed in the ocean often interact with different forms of plastic. For example, a bird skimming on the ocean surface might accidentally scoop up bits of floating plastic pellets and think they were food. But this bird wouldn't scoop up a larger floating object like a foam takeout container or a plastic bottle. So in this activity, you will discover how various animals are likely affected by common types of single-use plastic debris in the oceans. So there are two tasks in the activity. So in the first activity, you're going to use a data table to explore the different densities of plastic, and you're going to decide which type of plastic is going to float on the ocean water or sink in the ocean water. Remember, when trying to determine an object's buoyancy or its ability to float, an object is going to float on top of objects with more density. So the less dense object will float on something with more density. Then, in the second activity, you're going to read about the feeding habits of 9 different animals and complete a chart for each of those animals. So each student has a copy of the document, and I have already clicked this link and opened it on my desktop. All right, so let's look at activity number 1. So in this activity, you're going to use the data table of various plastic densities on the left side to complete this chart and identify the type of single plastic, and then decide if that type of plastic is going to float or sink. Remember, if it's going to float, it has to have a density lower than that of seawater, and the density of seawater is 1.03. So anything with a density less than that is going to float. So if I were looking at this first column, water bottles, all right, so water bottles have a density of 1.38 grams per milliliter. So that is greater than 1.03. So is that going to sink or float? Yes, it is going to sink in the water. So I will put sink in this column. So now it needs to determine what type of plastic this is. All right, so it has a density of 1.38 grams per milliliter. And if I look at the chart on the left side of the screen, I have 5 types of plastic, and they are categorized based on their densities. So 1.38 is in this range, so it is a polyethylene terephthalate, a number 1. All right, so I'll type this name in the type of plastic. All right, so now I need to read about so first complete the chart, of course. All right, so now I'm going to read the feeding habit of 9 different animals. They're on the left over here, and I'm going to complete the complete the chart by typing the name of each animal in the chart under the form of plastic that they will have trouble with or that they will interact with, and next to the ocean zone in which they're going to feed. And you can refer back to the activity, back to activity 1 to help you. You can type more than 1 animal in a box, so just kind of keep that in mind as you're working through these animals. All right, so let's look at the water bottle again. All right, so remember we decided that water bottles are going to sink in the ocean. All right, so since water bottles are going to sink, they're going to come in contact with pelagic feeders. All right, I'm sorry, benthic feeders. Benthic feeders, they're going to sink. So, all right, so what kind of organisms are benthic feeders? So I need to read each one. And as I'm reading each of these, I'm going to determine which ones are benthic feeders. For example, the loggerhead sea turtle does swim along the bottom, so that's and feeds on benthic mussels and clams and sea urchins. All right, so I'll put benthic feeders in this area. Are there any other benthic feeders? Oh, I skipped sea otters. So sea otters feed on benthic urchins and shellfish, bringing them to the surface to eat, but they feed on benthic urchins. So sea otters will come in contact with water bottles. All right, so that's how I'm going to complete that section. So you do need to recall which things are going to float and sink from the previous activity. And then you will type those organisms in the box in which it belongs. One thing to note, you will not necessarily put something in every single box for every single plastic item. So water bottles don't have a tendency to float, so they're not going to come in contact with surface feeders as often, but they do have a tendency to sink. So that's why you're focusing on the benthic feeders for this particular plastic item. And then once you finish that, there are some questions for you to answer in complete sentences, not incomplete sentences, but please write complete sentences. And then the very last activity in the module, is an ed puzzle. So, good luck with your next activity, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you learn lots of information about plastics in the ocean, and have a good day.